Gemini 3.0 is a fantastic model, but the sheer volume of updates is honestly overwhelming, and not every new feature deserves your attention. So after a month of going through official guides and testing Gemini 3 with real work, I've narrowed down the 5 changes that actually matter for professionals. Let's get started. Kicking things off with the first major update, improved multimodal understanding. In plain English, Gemini 3 has become much better at understanding images, video, and audio together. Previously, Gemini might have broken down a video into a collection of screenshots and an audio track. Now, Gemini 3 can process everything at once by linking audio cues to visual data. In practice, this means we can upload a short-form video, for example, and ask Gemini 3 to first watch the video to understand what's going on, then output specific and detailed recommendations for improvement. And it does exactly that, which is already pretty insane, right? But let's see how this translates to actual work. Here, I've uploaded a screen recording onto Gemini and said, I just recorded a walkthrough on how to toggle smart features in Gmail, watch the recording and turn it into a clean step-by-step checklist that I can hand to a new hire so they can do it next week without asking me questions. In under 60 seconds, Gemini turns a messy one-time recording into a permanent training asset, which is a complete game changer for anyone working in operations. Taking this a step further, and bear with me, this might sound a bit dystopian, imagine you were a UI UX researcher. You can now upload hours of user interviews and ask, list every moment the user frowned or paused for more than 3 seconds, and tell me exactly what was on screen in that moment. That level of analysis used to take a human team weeks of analysis. Now you can get it in days, if not hours. On a lighter note, this improved multimodality is also why Nano Banana Pro produces such clean images now. I can take a dense industry report, turn it into a clean infographic with legible text, something previous models struggled with, and tweak the design until it looks just right. It's this fluid movement, seamlessly translating video into text and text into image, that showcases what true multimodality looks like in practice. Moving on to the second major update, better use of large documents. So previous versions of Gemini already had a massive context window of over 1 million tokens, meaning we could upload a lot of files. But simply holding that much information is very different from actually understanding it. Think of it like someone flipping through a 200-page book instead of thoroughly studying it. With this update, Gemini 3 is now 60% better at finding and using specific information buried deep inside your documents. And to show you the difference, here's a real-world example. Let's say you're a strategy analyst responsible for covering Meta. You can now upload all the earnings call recordings and financial PDFs from the past year and ask Gemini, based on all these sources, what are the 3 biggest discrepancies between management's stated strategy in the video calls and what the financial data in the PDFs actually shows? Just think about how complex that request is. Gemini would first need to figure out what the executives actually meant from the earnings calls, find the right financial numbers buried in I don't know how many pages, and then connect the two. Instead of a generic summary or hallucinating a connection, Gemini 3 now correctly identifies that Zuckerberg claims strong momentum for Reality Labs. But in reality, from the financial statements, it shows that that segment lost more than 4.4 billion and represents less than 1% of their total revenue. So as a rule of thumb, we can now stop treating the context window as just a storage bin for our files and use it instead as an active working memory when, for example, we need to spot conflicts across different file types. This connects to something interesting. According to LinkedIn, people management is now the #1 skill employers are looking for in the age of AI. And roles requiring these skills typically pay $32,000 more per year. So if you want to build that skill, I'd recommend the new Google People Management Essentials course on Coursera. It comes from the Google School for Leaders, which means you're getting nearly 20 years of internal Google research, the same training they give their own managers, packaged into a practical course that anyone can take. In addition to core skills like coaching and decision making, they also cover how to use AI as a management tool, which ties directly into what we've been talking about. Right now, you can get 40% off 3 months of Coursera Plus, so click the link in the description to get started. Huge thanks to Coursera for sponsoring this portion of the video. On to update number 3, enhanced workspace search. To be clear, the ability for Gemini to search across your Google apps has been around for a while. But let's be honest, in the past, it was a hit or miss. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it hallucinated emails that never existed. With Gemini 3, that inconsistency is basically gone, and now the Workspace integration is reliable enough that I actually trust it with day-to-day work. Diving into a real example, a freelancer I worked with a year ago recently emailed me asking for a testimonial. Previously, I would have to spend like 20 minutes searching Gmail for old threads and checking my Google Drive for like shared docs, right? Now I can just enable the Workspace extension and ask Gemini, find everything related to this freelancer and his work across my Gmail and Drive and draft 2 testimonials, 1 short and 1 detailed. And a minute later, I have drafts that cite specific deliverables and outcomes pulled directly from my actual correspondence. Put simply, this change means we're able to turn our scattered digital history, emails, Drive files, and docs, into a single searchable knowledge base we can actually query. Here's another use case for those of you struggling with email management. Let's say it's Monday morning and your Gmail is overflowing with unread messages, right? Instead of scrolling through everything, enable the Gmail extension and ask Gemini, find emails from the last week that mention deadlines. Group them by category or project, and tell me what needs my response today. Gemini scans your Gmail, pulls the relevant threads, organizes them into logical groupings, and flags what requires action now. And here's one more for those of us, especially me, who hate writing performance reviews. With the Workspace extension enabled, ask Gemini to search my emails, docs, and calendar from the past 6 months. Identify the major projects I contributed to, plot any quantifiable results like target achieved or deadlines met, and draft a performance review I can edit. Instead of spending an afternoon reconstructing your own accomplishments, you get a first draft with specifics already filled in. Pro tip, if your company requires you to follow a specific structure or format, just upload your previous write-ups and ask Gemini to reference those files. So as a rule of thumb, if you would normally spend more than 10 minutes hunting through old emails and docs to reconstruct context in Google Workspace, ask Gemini first. By the way, if you're tired of getting inconsistent or just straight up bad results from AI, I put together something called Essential Power Prompts. It's a Notion library of 15 battle-tested prompts I actually use for real work, each with a video walkthrough showing exactly how to apply it. These are all plug and play, so you can start using them immediately. Link down below. On to the 4th major update, generative surfaces. To be clear, I've always maintained that benchmark scores are an extremely limited way to evaluate model performance because they can be so easily gamed. But in this case, I do need to recognize that Gemini 3 scored a whopping 72.7% on the Screen Spot Pro benchmark, which measures screen understanding. And if you compare that to just 11.4% for the previous model, you can see the massive leap in its ability to understand user interface layouts. In simple terms, Gemini can now generate interactive tools and visual layouts on the fly, so the output format matches our actual task. For example, I was recently evaluating 3 newsletter platforms, Substack, Ghost, and Beehive, none of which are sponsors, by the way. I uploaded their pricing and feature pages onto Gemini and asked, create a comprehensive comparison table that compares these 3 platforms based on the attached documents. Now, just for contrast, if I don't enable dynamic view, I get exactly what I'd expect. A comprehensive, yet static table comparison. Useful, sure, but nothing special. Now, watch what happens when I use the same prompt, but this time with dynamic view enabled. We're gonna fast forward a bit here, and after a few minutes, I get a fully functional and actually useful interactive tool. Under the Revenue Calculator tab, I can move these sliders to estimate annual gross revenue based on subscriber count and monthly subscription price. I can see in real time how much I get to keep after each platform takes their cut. And that's not even mentioning these other tabs that compare features in detail. I can even follow up with, make this tool more useful and be more objective in your comparison. And Gemini is able to update the tool based on that simple and vague feedback. Okay, I was gonna move on, but this is crazy. There's an objective analysis here, awesome. It created a break-even calculator that looks to be correct. And they have a recommendation quiz for beginners. Damn. As you can see, with generative interfaces, the output arrives in a format we can use immediately, meaning we don't need to manually reformat the AI output into something usable. Here's an even more powerful use case. Instead of creating slides to present this data in a quarterly review, for example, we can share this spreadsheet with Gemini, enable dynamic view, and say, create a dashboard where I can filter by region and click any bar to see the underlying accounts. After a minute, we have a revenue insights dashboard where I can click into specific regions to uncover insights. APAC has a much higher churn rate than Americas, which requires a follow-up. Or I can just go into all regions and click into specific bars for more information. Pro tip, explicitly ask for the controls you want, like give me a dashboard with a slider for budget and a toggle for region, so the AI can create tools tailored to our use cases. Update number 5, better intent understanding. In a nutshell, Gemini 3 is significantly better at understanding vague instructions, which shifts the focus from prompt engineering, obsessing over exact wording, to context engineering, curating the right background information. Here's a simple example. Previously, after a team meeting, you write something like this: act as a professional but friendly colleague, draft an email summarizing the key points from today's meeting, keep it under 200 words, use bullet points. You have to spell out tone, format, and length explicitly to get a decent result, right? Now we can paste our rough notes and just say, write a concise email with next steps. And Gemini infers the appropriate tone, structure, and length on its own, giving us the same quality output for a fraction of the instruction effort. Here's an oversimplified way to think about this. Gemini is now much better at guessing your tone, your format, and your length. Although I heard effort matters more than size. But Gemini can't guess your facts. So giving it better context, like relevant emails, docs, and data, now yields significantly higher returns than writing a better prompt. Here's another example. Let's say you need to write a LinkedIn post for your VP. Previously, you had to describe the writing style you wanted with a bunch of adjectives like punchy and thought leadership, which is hard to nail and usually got you generic results anyways. Now you can upload 3 previous posts your VP actually wrote and say, here are 3 examples of my writing style. Based on these, rewrite this dry Q4 report into a LinkedIn post. Instead of describing the quote unquote vibe, we've now provided the ground truth of the vibe, the previous post, so that Gemini can mimic the sentence structure, vocabulary, and rhythm automatically. The output sounds like your VP because you showed it what your VP sounds like. So as a rule of thumb, focus on gathering the right context to share, not perfecting how you phrase the prompt. Here's a bonus update for those of you still watching: reduced sycophancy. In simple terms, Google explicitly states that Gemini 3 was trained to be less agreeable, meaning Gemini is now much more willing to tell us when we're wrong. And in my testing, that actually holds up. For example, I've stitched together a presentation from 3 different teams, and I'm worried it sounds disjointed. And so I share that deck with Gemini and ask, identify storytelling weaknesses and logical contradictions between the different sections of this report. Instead of telling me everything looks great, Gemini highlights a disconnect between the initial revenue target and the final attainment numbers, and even predicts the pushback I'd likely receive from leadership. Regular viewers will recognize this is related to the red team technique I covered in a previous video, where you ask the AI to adopt a critical persona to get sharper feedback. Check that out if you haven't already. See you on the next video. In the meantime, have a great one.